The gunshot echoed through the canyon just as Miriam's wagon wheels splintered apart, sending her lurching sideways into the rocky Arizona dust, her cargo of flour sacks and medicine bottles scattering like dice across the desert floor. It was July of 1882, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the parched landscape between Tucson and the small mining settlement of Copper Ridge, where Miriam had been heading to deliver supplies for her uncle's general store. She was 22 years old, strong from years of working alongside her family, and she had made this journey a dozen times before without incident. But today, everything had gone catastrophically wrong. The outlaws had appeared from behind a cluster of saguaro cacti, 3 men with bandanas covering their faces and revolvers gleaming in the harsh light. They had fired a warning shot that struck her wheel, clearly intending to rob her rather than kill her outright. But Miriam was not the type to surrender without a fight. She had reached for the rifle her uncle insisted she carry, her muscular arm steadying the weapon with practiced ease. But before she could fire, one of the outlaws had shot it clean out of her hands. Now she crouched behind the overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs, her fingers bleeding from where the rifle had been torn away. The outlaws were advancing slowly, their boots crunching on gravel, their laughter crude and threatening. Miriam looked around desperately for any means of escape or defense, but there was nothing except the endless expanse of desert and the merciless sky above. Then she heard it. The thunder of hooves approaching fast from the south. The outlaws heard it too. They spun around, their revolvers raised, but the rider was already upon them. He came in low and fast, his horse a blur of chestnut muscle, and in one fluid motion he knocked the first outlaw clean off his feet with a swing of something Miriam could not quite see. The second outlaw fired, but the rider had already moved, circling around with impossible speed and precision. His lasso sang through the air and caught the second man around the torso, yanking him backward into the dust. The third outlaw, the leader by the look of his expensive boots and silver-studded belt, aimed carefully at the rider's chest. Miriam did not think. She grabbed the nearest heavy object, a cast-iron skillet that had tumbled from her supplies, and hurled it with all the strength in her well-developed arms. It struck the outlaw's hand with a satisfying crack, and his shot went wild, the bullet singing harmlessly into the sky. The rider took advantage of the distraction. He dismounted in one smooth leap and tackled the third outlaw, wrestling the gun from his grip and delivering a solid punch that left the man sprawling unconscious in the sand. The whole confrontation had lasted perhaps 2 minutes, but to Miriam it felt like an eternity compressed into heartbeats. She stood slowly, her legs shaking with adrenaline, and got her first clear look at her rescuer. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, weathered build of a man who spent his life outdoors. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell to his collar beneath a battered hat that had seen better days. His face was tanned from the sun, with strong features and eyes the color of creek water over stones, a striking greenish gray that seemed to catch the light. He was perhaps 26 or 27, and when he turned to look at her, there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. Concern, respect, and an intensity she could not quite name. "You all right, miss?" he asked, his voice a low drawl that spoke of Texas or perhaps Oklahoma. He moved toward her with surprising gentleness for a man who had just fought off 3 armed outlaws. "I am now," Miriam said, trying to steady her voice. "Thanks to you." He glanced at the overturned wagon, then at her, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Thanks to us, I would say. That was quite a throw. Saved my life, most likely." Miriam felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert sun. "I just did what needed doing. Same as me." He extended a hand. "Name is Jacob Brennan. Most folks call me Jake." She took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the firm grip that spoke of years of hard work. "Miriam Caldwell. Most folks call me Miriam." He laughed at that, a genuine sound that seemed to ease the tension still crackling in the air. "Well, Miss Miriam Caldwell, how about we get these fellows tied up proper and get your wagon situation sorted out? Cannot have you stranded out here." They worked together to secure the 3 outlaws, using rope from Jake's saddlebags to bind their hands and feet. The men were starting to come around groaning and cursing, but Jake paid them no mind beyond making sure the knots were tight. Miriam found herself watching him as he worked, noting the easy competence of his movements, the way his muscles flexed beneath his dusty shirt. "Where were you headed?" Jake asked as he examined her broken wagon wheel. "Copper Ridge. My uncle runs the general store there, and I help with deliveries from Tucson. This wheel is not going to get me there, though." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Copper Ridge is about 8 miles north, too far to walk in this heat, especially with supplies to carry." He looked up at her, squinting against the sun. "I have got a camp about 2 miles east, near a spring. We could take what is most valuable, get you and the goods there safely, then I could ride into Copper Ridge and fetch help. Someone could bring out a new wheel and a wagon team." It was a sensible plan, and Miriam could not think of a better alternative. "That would be much appreciated, Mr. Brennan." "Jake," he corrected with that smile again. "We just fought off outlaws together. I reckon that puts us past formalities." They loaded what they could onto Jake's horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding named Rusty, who seemed remarkably patient with the extra burden. Miriam insisted on carrying several of the heavier flour sacks herself, slinging them over her shoulders despite Jake's protests. "Miss Miriam, those sacks must weigh 40 pounds each," he said, his eyebrows raised. 45, she corrected, adjusting her grip. "And I have been hauling supplies since I was 14. I am stronger than I look." Jake studied her for a moment, and something shifted in his expression. His gaze traveled from her face to her shoulders, to the way her arms flexed beneath her practical cotton sleeves as she balanced the weight. There was no impropriety in his look, nothing that made her uncomfortable. Instead, it was appreciation, pure and simple, the kind of recognition one craftsman might give another's fine work. "Strong arms like yours are rare," he said quietly, and there was something almost reverent in his tone. "And I think they are beautiful on you." Miriam felt the words settle over her like sunshine breaking through clouds. All her life, she had been told by the other women in Tucson that she should be more delicate, more refined. Her mother had despaired of her ever finding a husband because she could outlift most of the young men in town and was not ashamed of it. She had learned to feel self-conscious about her strength, to hide it when possible, to make herself smaller. But Jake was not looking at her with criticism or discomfort. He was looking at her with admiration. "Thank you," she said, and was surprised to find her voice had gone soft. "That is kind of you to say." "Not kind, just truthful." He swung up onto Rusty, then extended his hand down to her. "Come on, you can ride behind me. Rusty is strong enough for 2 plus these supplies." Miriam took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She had to set down the flour sacks first, which Jake secured to the saddle, and then she was settling onto the horse's broad back, her arms instinctively coming around Jake's waist to hold on. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, could smell the scent of leather and sage and honest sweat. They left the 3 outlaws tied up in the shade of the overturned wagon with a canteen of water. Jake assured Miriam that he would send the sheriff from Copper Ridge to collect them. Then they set off across the desert, Rusty picking his way carefully over the rocky terrain. "How did you happen to be passing by just when I needed help?" Miriam asked, after a few minutes of riding in companionable silence. "I was tracking a wild Mustang stallion," Jake explained. "Been following him for 3 days now. He has got a herd of about 20 mares, and I am hoping to gentle him, bring him into my string. I breed and train horses, have got a small ranch about 10 miles from Copper Ridge. Was heading back that way when I heard the gunshot." "You breed horses? That must be good work." "It is the best work I know. Every horse has got its own personality, its own way of moving through the world. Helping them reach their potential, finding the right person for each one, that is satisfying in a way nothing else quite matches." He paused. "What about you? Do you enjoy running supplies?" Miriam considered the question. "I enjoy the freedom of it," she said honestly. "Being out on the road, being useful, being strong enough to do a job that needs doing. My uncle needed help after my aunt passed 2 years ago, and I was happy to step in. But sometimes I wonder what else might be out there for me. What would you want if you could have anything?" No one had ever asked her that before. Miriam rested her cheek against Jake's shoulder blade, thinking. "I would want land of my own," she said slowly. "A place where I could build something lasting. Maybe a ranch, maybe a farm. Something that would grow and thrive because of the work I put into it. And I would want someone to share it with. Someone who would not mind that I am not the delicate type." She felt Jake's chuckle vibrate through his chest. "Delicate is overrated. Give me someone strong and capable any day." They rode on, and Miriam found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait, into the solid presence of the man in front of her. The desert stretched out around them in shades of gold and rust and deep red, punctuated by the green of cacti and the occasional scrub brush. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermals, and in the distance mountains rose like ancient sentinels against the sky. Jake's camp turned out to be a small oasis of sorts, tucked into a hollow where a spring bubbled up from between the rocks and fed a small pool surrounded by cottonwood trees. The shade was a blessed relief from the relentless sun, and Miriam could see why Jake had chosen this spot. There was grass for his horse, water for drinking and washing, and enough shelter to make a comfortable temporary home. He helped her down from Rusty, his hands strong and steady on her waist, and for a moment they stood close together, not quite touching, but near enough that Miriam could count the gold flecks in his gray-green eyes. "Welcome to my palace," Jake said with a grin, breaking the moment. "It is not much, but the water is clean and the company is good." His camp consisted of a bedroll, saddlebags, a small cook fire, and various pieces of equipment for tracking and horse training. It was spare but well organized, everything placed with care and purpose. Miriam helped him unload the supplies from Rusty, and they stacked the flour sacks and crates in the shade. "You rest," Jake said firmly when they were done. "I am going to ride into Copper Ridge, let your uncle know what happened, and arrange for a wagon to come out tomorrow morning to collect you and the supplies. Should only take me a few hours there and back." "I could come with you," Miriam offered, though in truth she was bone-tired from the heat and the terror and the aftermath of adrenaline. "You could, but then you would have to ride all the way back out here with the wagon tomorrow anyway. Better to stay, rest up, have some water. I will be back before sundown with food and news." He paused, then added with unexpected shyness, "If that sits all right with you, I would not want you to feel uncomfortable being here alone." Miriam looked around at the peaceful camp, the clear water, the sheltering trees. She thought about Jake's steady presence, the way he had fought for her without hesitation, the respect in his eyes when he looked at her. "I feel safer here than I have felt anywhere in a long time," she said truthfully. Something warm kindled in Jake's expression. "Good. That is good." He swung back up onto Rusty, settling his hat more firmly on his head. "There is jerky in the saddlebag if you get hungry, and a spare blanket if you want a nap. Make yourself at home." She watched him ride away, horse and rider moving as one unit across the desert floor until they disappeared into the heat shimmer on the horizon. Then she turned back to the camp and allowed herself to truly relax for the first time since the attack. The spring water was cold and delicious. Miriam drank deeply, then splashed her face and neck, washing away the dust and sweat of the day. She found the jerky Jake had mentioned and ate a few pieces, then spread the spare blanket in the deepest shade and lay down, meaning only to rest her eyes for a moment. She woke to the sound of hoofbeats and voices. The sun was lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of amber and gold, and Jake was riding back into camp with another man beside him. Miriam sat up quickly, brushing grass from her hair. The second rider was older, perhaps 50, with a graying beard and a star pinned to his vest. The sheriff, she realized. "Miriam," Jake called out, dismounting. "Everything all right? I brought Sheriff Morrison. He wanted to hear about the attack firsthand." The sheriff tipped his hat to her as she stood and brushed off her skirts. "Miss Caldwell, Jake here tells me you had quite the adventure today. Can you describe the men who attacked you?" Miriam recounted the whole incident, describing the outlaws as best she could remember. Sheriff Morrison took notes in a small leather book, nodding along, his expression growing grimmer. "Sounds like the Garrett gang," he said when she finished. "They have been hitting wagons along this route for the past month. We have been trying to catch them red-handed. Jake told me where you left them tied up. I rode out there with 2 deputies before coming here. We got them in custody now, and your wagon too. We will bring it into town tonight. Keep it safe until we can get you a new wheel." "What about the supplies?" Miriam asked. "Some of them were medicine that folks in Copper Ridge need." "Your uncle is arranging to have them picked up tomorrow. He wanted to come himself, but I told him you were in good hands." The sheriff glanced at Jake with something that might have been approval. "Jake has a solid reputation in these parts. You could not ask for a better person to have watching your back." Jake looked distinctly uncomfortable with the praise, his cheeks coloring slightly beneath his tan. "Just did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," the sheriff corrected. Most folks would have kept riding, not wanting to get involved. You rode straight into danger to help a stranger. That says something about character. Miriam found herself agreeing wholeheartedly, but she kept silent, sensing that Jake's discomfort would only grow if she added to the compliments. The sheriff stayed for another 20 minutes, asking a few more questions and sharing news from town. Apparently, the capture of the Garrett gang was already causing celebration in Copper Ridge. The outlaws had been terrorizing the supply routes for weeks, and their arrest would make travel much safer for everyone. After the sheriff left, Jake busied himself with building up the fire and preparing dinner. He had brought back beans, bacon, fresh bread, and a jar of peach preserves from the general store, along with coffee and an apple pie that Miriam's uncle had sent specifically for her. "Your uncle seems like a good man," Jake said, as he set the bacon to sizzling in a pan over the fire. "Worried about you, something fierce, but he trusts you to handle yourself. Said you were the most capable person he knew." "He has been good to me," Miriam said, sitting cross-legged on the blanket near the fire. "Took me in when my parents died of fever 4 years ago. Gave me purpose when I needed it most." "I am sorry about your parents." "Thank you. It was hard, but it also taught me that I was stronger than I thought. Had to be." She watched Jake work, noting the easy way he moved, the care he took with even simple tasks. "What about your family? Are they in Copper Ridge?" "No family left," Jake said, his voice neutral but with an undercurrent of old pain. "Lost my parents and sister to cholera when I was 16. Spent the next 10 years drifting, working ranches from Texas to Montana, learning everything I could about horses. Saved my money, and 2 years ago, I bought my land near Copper Ridge. Finally felt like I had a home again." They were both orphans, Miriam realized. Both alone in the world, making their own way through sheer determination and strength. The recognition created an immediate bond, an understanding that needed no words. Dinner was simple but delicious, the bacon crispy and the beans savory with molasses and spices. They ate as the sun set, painting the sky in impossible shades of purple and pink and orange. Jake poured coffee from a battered pot, and they sipped it while sharing the apple pie, passing the tin plate back and forth between them. "Your uncle said you have been making these supply runs for 2 years now," Jake said, scraping up the last of the pie filling. "That you never had trouble before today." "That is right. I know this route like the back of my hand. I suppose I got complacent, stopped being as watchful as I should have been. Not your fault. Those outlaws would have hit any wagon that came along. You just happened to be the unlucky one today." He set down the empty plate and looked at her seriously. "But you handled yourself well. That throw with the skillet, your aim was perfect. Where did you learn to throw like that?" Miriam smiled at the memory. "My father taught me. He said every person should know how to defend themselves, man or woman. We used to practice throwing knives at targets behind our house. Drove my mother crazy, but I got good at it. Guess that skill finally came in useful. Strong and skilled, that is a rare combination." There it was again, that note of admiration that made warmth bloom in Miriam's chest. She looked down at her arms, at the muscles that years of hard work had built, and for the first time in a long time, she felt proud rather than self-conscious. "Can I ask you something?" she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Anything? Earlier, when you said my strength was beautiful, did you mean that? Or were you just being polite?" Jake set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. The firelight danced across his features, making his eyes seem even more intense. "I meant every word. Miriam, I have spent my whole life working with horses, and you know what I have learned? The strongest ones, the ones with the most power and muscle, they are also the most graceful, the most capable of incredible things. Strength is not something to hide or be ashamed of. It is something to celebrate." He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her forearm, his fingers tracing the line of muscle there. "This strength of yours, it is part of who you are. It is beautiful because it is you." Miriam felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever made her feel that her strength was not a flaw to be overcome, but a gift to be honored. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much that means to me." "I think maybe I do," Jake said softly. "I know what it is like to be different, to not quite fit the mold people expect. But those differences, they are what make us interesting, what make us who we are." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them, the stars beginning to emerge overhead. The desert night was cool and clear, the air smelling of sage and smoke, and the indefinable scent of wild places. "I should set up the sleeping arrangements," Jake said eventually, standing and brushing off his pants. "You take the bedroll. I will sleep on the other side of the fire. Make sure you have privacy and comfort." "I cannot take your bedroll," Miriam protested. "This is your camp, and you are my guest. Besides, I have slept on the ground more times than I can count. One more night would not hurt me." He was already pulling the bedroll over to the side of the camp, farthest from where he had been sleeping, creating a clear boundary. "If you need anything in the night, just call out. I am a light sleeper." Miriam wanted to argue further, but the exhaustion of the day was catching up with her. The bedroll looked impossibly inviting, and Jake's consideration touched her deeply. "All right, thank you, Jake, for everything." "My pleasure, Miriam, truly." She settled into the bedroll, which smelled pleasantly of leather and the outdoors, and watched as Jake banked the fire and laid out his own sleeping spot with a saddle for a pillow and a single blanket. He caught her looking and grinned. "Good night, Miriam." "Good night, Jake." Sleep claimed her quickly, pulling her down into dreams of strong hands and kind eyes, and the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in her life. Morning arrived with birdsong and the smell of fresh coffee. Miriam woke to find Jake already up, the fire rebuilt and breakfast cooking. He had caught fish from the spring somehow, and they were sizzling in the pan alongside leftover bread toasted crisp. "Good morning," he called when he saw her sitting up. "Hope I did not wake you too early." "What time is it?" she asked, stretching. "About 7. The wagon from town should be here in an hour or so." Miriam felt a pang of disappointment. She had enjoyed the peace of this place, the easy companionship with Jake. Going back to town, to regular life, felt suddenly unappealing. They ate breakfast together, the conversation flowing easily as they talked about everything and nothing. Jake told her about the Mustang stallion he was tracking, describing the horse's intelligence and wild beauty with the passion of a true horseman. Miriam found herself sharing stories about her childhood, about her parents and their small farm outside Tucson, about dreams she had almost forgotten she had. The wagon arrived right on schedule, driven by a young man named Tommy, who worked for Miriam's uncle. He had brought a new wheel and the tools to install it, and Jake immediately set to helping with the repairs. Miriam insisted on helping too, and together the three of them had the wagon rode, worthy within an hour. "Your supplies are all in town, Miss Caldwell," Tommy said, wiping grease from his hands. "Mr. Caldwell has them stored safe at the shop. Says whenever you are ready to head back to Tucson, just let him know." But Miriam found herself saying, "I think I will stay in Copper Ridge for a few days, if my uncle does not mind. After yesterday, I could use a little rest before making the return journey." It was not entirely a lie. She was tired, but the real reason she wanted to stay was standing next to the wagon, securing the last of the bolts on the new wheel, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms that flexed as he worked. "I am sure he would not mind at all," Tommy said with a knowing smile. "He has been wanting you to take more time off anyway." Jake straightened up, catching Miriam's eye. "If you are staying in Copper Ridge, perhaps you would like to see my ranch? It is not far, and I could show you those horses I was telling you about." "I would like that very much," Miriam said, her heart beating faster. They loaded the supplies from Jake's camp onto the wagon, and Jake saddled up Rusty. The plan was for Tommy to drive the wagon back to Copper Ridge while Jake and Miriam rode together, taking the scenic route that would pass by Jake's property. The ranch was more impressive than Miriam had expected. Set in a valley with good grass and a stream running through it, the property consisted of about 200 acres with a small but well-built cabin, a barn, and several corrals. A dozen horses grazed in the pastures, their coats gleaming in the morning sun. "It is not much yet," Jake said as they approached, and Miriam could hear both pride and nervousness in his voice. "But I have got plans to expand, to build a bigger house someday, to increase the herd. I have got good bloodlines, and word is spreading about the quality of my horses." "It is wonderful," Miriam said honestly. "You have built something real here, Jake, something lasting." He helped her down from Rusty, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Would you like the tour?" She absolutely would. Jake showed her everything, the barn with its neat rows of stalls and tack room, the corrals where he trained the horses, the cabin that was small but comfortable with a stone fireplace and handmade furniture. He introduced her to each horse by name, telling her their personalities and quirks. There was Daisy, a gentle mare perfect for children. Thunder, a spirited gelding that needed an experienced rider. Moonlight, a silvery gray horse that Jake had trained from a wild-caught filly. "You really love this," Miriam said as they leaned on the corral fence, watching the horses graze. "I do. It is the first thing that has felt right since I lost my family. Like, I have finally found my purpose." He glanced at her. "What about you? Have you found yours?" Miriam thought about the question carefully. "I thought running supplies for my uncle was enough, and it is good, meaningful work. But lately I have been feeling like there should be something more. I just have not known what." "Maybe you will figure it out while you are in Copper Ridge," Jake suggested. "Sometimes a change of scenery helps clarify things." They spent the rest of the morning at the ranch. Jake taught Miriam some of his training techniques, showing her how to read a horse's body language, how to communicate through gentle pressure and release. She was a natural, he told her, the same strength and capability that served her well with physical labor, translating beautifully to working with the large animals. "You have got good instincts," he said, after she successfully got Thunder to come to her from across the corral, something the usually standoffish gelding rarely did with strangers. "And the horses trust you. That is not something that can be taught. Either you have it or you do not." Miriam felt a thrill of excitement at his words. She had always loved animals, but had never had the opportunity to work with horses like this. "Could you teach me more?" she asked impulsively. "I mean, while I'm in town, if you have time." Jake's face lit up. "I would be honored. Why do not you plan to come out tomorrow? We could make a day of it." "I would like that." They rode back to Copper Ridge together in the early afternoon, taking their time, talking and laughing like old friends. When they reached the town, Jake insisted on escorting her to her uncle's store, even though it was out of his way. Miriam's uncle, a rotund man with kind eyes and a ready smile, was effusive in his thanks to Jake. "You saved my niece's life," he said, pumping Jake's hand vigorously. "I cannot thank you enough. If there is ever anything you need, anything at all, you just come to me." "No thanks necessary," Jake said, looking slightly overwhelmed by the attention. "I am just glad I was in the right place at the right time." As Jake turned to leave, Miriam followed him outside. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "What time should I come to the ranch?" "Whenever you like. I will be there all day." He mounted Rusty, then looked down at her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "I am looking forward to it, Miriam." "So am I." She watched him ride away, then turned to find her uncle watching her with a speculative expression. "He seems like a good man," her uncle said carefully. "He is," Miriam agreed, unable to keep the smile off her face. "I am glad. You deserve someone good, Miriam, someone who appreciates you for who you are." That night, lying in the comfortable bed in the room above her uncle's store, Miriam found herself unable to sleep. Her mind kept returning to Jake. His smile, his words, the way he had looked at her like she was something precious and strong and worthwhile. She thought about his ranch, about the way her heart had lifted when she imagined what it would be like to work with horses every day, to build something meaningful in that beautiful valley. She had known him less than 2 days, but already she could feel something shifting inside her, like a door opening onto a future she had not dared to imagine before. The next morning, Miriam borrowed a horse from her uncle's stable and rode out to Jake's ranch. She had dressed practically in split riding skirts and a sturdy blouse, her hair braided back, and she carried a basket of food her uncle had insisted she bring. Jake was waiting for her in the yard, and his face broke into a huge grin when he saw her approaching. "You came," he said, as if there had been any doubt. "I said I would." They spent the day working with the horses. Jake was a patient, thorough teacher, and Miriam soaked up everything he shared, like desert sand absorbing rare rain. He taught her how to read a horse's mood from the set of its ears and the tension in its body, how to move with calm confidence that reassured rather than threatened, how to use her strength not to dominate, but to guide and protect. "You are a natural at this," Jake said, as Miriam successfully led Moonlight through a series of obstacles without a halter, using only body language and trust. "Have you really never done this before?" "Never like this. My family had plow horses, but we never trained them, just worked them." "Well, you have got a gift. If you ever wanted to learn more, to really study horse training, I would be happy to teach you everything I know." The offer hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Miriam met his eyes and saw hope there, and nervousness, and something deeper that made her breath catch. "I would like that," she said quietly. "I would like that very much." They broke for lunch, spreading the food from Miriam's basket under the shade of a large oak tree near the stream. Her uncle had packed enough for a small army: sandwiches, cheese, apples, cookies, and a jug of cool lemonade. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily from horses to books to memories to dreams. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said as they were finishing the last of the cookies. "And you do not have to answer if it is too personal." "Ask." "Yesterday you said you wondered what else might be out there for you, beyond running supplies. Have you thought any more about what that might be?" Miriam looked out over the ranch, at the horses grazing peacefully, at the cabin with smoke curling from its chimney, at the man beside her who had somehow become important to her in such a short time. "I am starting to get some ideas," she said carefully, "but I do not want to assume anything or move too fast." "What if I told you I was having some ideas too?" Jake said, his voice soft. "Ideas about maybe not being alone anymore, about sharing this place with someone who loved it as much as I do, someone strong and capable and beautiful." Miriam's heart was hammering now. "I would say I would like to hear more about those ideas." Jake shifted closer, his hand finding hers in the grass. His fingers were warm and calloused and steady. "I know we have only just met. I know this is fast, maybe too fast. But Miriam, I have never met anyone like you. You are everything I did not know I was looking for. And if you wanted to stay in Copper Ridge, if you wanted to learn more about horses and maybe spend more time out here, I would really like that. I would like that more than just about anything." She turned to face him fully, her hand tightening on his. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying I would like to court you properly if you will have me. Get to know you better, let you get to know me. See where this goes, because I think it could go somewhere really good." Miriam felt tears threatening again, but they were happy tears this time, tears of relief and joy. "I would like that too," she said. "I would like that so much. Jake, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. It is fast and it is probably crazy, but it feels right." "It does feel right," he agreed. Then, slowly giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tender and sweet, and it sent warmth flooding through Miriam's entire body. She kissed him back, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek, feeling the slight roughness of stubble against her palm. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "So, this is happening?" Miriam said, a little breathlessly. "This is happening," Jake confirmed, looking just as dazed and happy as she felt. They spent the rest of the afternoon working with the horses, but everything had changed. They moved around each other with a new awareness, finding excuses to touch. A hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing as they passed a lead rope, standing close together to watch a horse's progress. It felt natural and right, like they had been doing this dance for years rather than days. As the sun started to sink toward the horizon, Jake invited Miriam to stay for dinner. "Nothing fancy," he warned. "Just stew and biscuits, but I would love the company." Miriam agreed without hesitation. She sent her borrowed horse back to town with a note for her uncle, explaining that she would be late, then helped Jake prepare the meal. They worked together in the small cabin kitchen with easy coordination, and Miriam found herself imagining what it would be like to do this every day, cooking together, eating together, sharing the small moments that made up a life. After dinner, they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the stars emerge. Jake had his arm around Miriam's shoulders, and she was tucked against his side, feeling warm and safe and happier than she could remember being in years. "Tell me more about your dreams," Jake said. "The land you wanted, the things you wanted to build. Tell me everything." So Miriam did. She told him about wanting a place where she could grow things and raise animals, where her strength would be an asset rather than something to hide. She told him about wanting a partnership, a real, true partnership, where both people contributed and supported each other. She told him about wanting children someday, a whole house full of them, to rebuild the family she had lost. Jake listened intently, and when she finished, he said, "That sounds like a good life, a really good life." He paused, then added carefully, "It sounds like the life I want too." "Does it?" Miriam asked, her heart soaring. "It does. I want all of that, with the right person. And Miriam, I think you might be the right person. She turned in his arms to look at him. I think you might be too. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both flushed and breathing hard. I should probably get you back to town, Jake said reluctantly, before your uncle sends out a search party. Miriam laughed. You are probably right. Jake saddled Rusty, and they rode back to Copper Ridge together, Miriam sitting in front of Jake this time, his arms around her as he held the reins. It was full dark by the time they arrived, the town quiet except for the saloon at the far end of the main street. At the door to her uncle's store, Jake dismounted and helped Miriam down. He held her hands, looking serious in the lamplight spilling from the window. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. Yes, and the day after that, and the day after that. He grinned. Good, that is real good. One more kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise, and then Miriam was slipping inside, her heart singing. Her uncle was waiting up, reading by lamplight. He looked up when she entered and smiled knowingly. Good day? The best day, Miriam said. I am glad, sweetheart. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Over the next several weeks, Miriam and Jake saw each other almost every day. She would ride out to his ranch in the mornings, and they would work with the horses together. Jake taught her everything he knew, and Miriam proved to be an exceptional student. Her strength served her well with the larger horses, and her patience and intuition made her a natural trainer. But it was not just about the horses. They talked for hours, learning each other's stories, dreams, fears, and hopes. They cooked meals together and ate them on the cabin porch. They rode out into the desert to watch the sunsets. They went to church together on Sundays, and the whole town began to notice and approve of their courtship. Miriam's uncle was particularly pleased. Jake is a good man, he told Miriam one evening. Hard-working, honest, kind. And more importantly, he sees you for who you really are. He appreciates you. He does, Miriam agreed. Uncle, I think I'm falling in love with him. I think you already have fallen, sweetheart, and I think he has fallen just as hard for you. It was true. What had started as attraction and possibility had deepened into something profound and unshakable. Miriam found herself thinking about Jake constantly when they were apart. She loved his laugh, his dedication to his work, the gentle way he handled the horses, the passionate way he kissed her when they were alone. She loved his strength and his vulnerability, the way he had built a life from nothing through sheer determination and hard work. And Jake made no secret of his feelings either. He told her often that she was beautiful, strong, capable, amazing. He praised her skill with the horses and her quick mind. He held her hand in public and kissed her goodbye without shame. He was courting her openly and proudly, and it made Miriam feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. 2 months into their courtship, Jake took Miriam on a special ride. They packed a picnic and rode out to a high mesa overlooking his ranch and the valley beyond. The view was spectacular, endless sky and rolling hills painted in shades of gold and green. I wanted to bring you here, Jake said, as they spread out a blanket and sat down with their food. This is my favorite spot on the whole property. Whenever I have big decisions to make or just need to think, I come up here. I can see why, Miriam said, taking in the vista. It is beautiful, peaceful. Miriam, Jake said, and something in his tone made her turn to look at him. He was nervous, she realized, his hands fidgeting with the brim of his hat. These past 2 months have been the best of my life. Getting to know you, working beside you, just being with you, it has been everything I hoped for and more. For me too, Miriam said softly. I know it has not been long. I know some folks might say we should wait, take more time, but I am not a man who waits when he knows what he wants. He set down his hat and took both her hands in his. And I know I want you, Miriam. I want to build a life with you, right here on this land. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to work with you, dream with you, raise a family with you. I want everything. Tears were streaming down Miriam's face now, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. Jake, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, but beautiful. A gold band with a small blue stone that caught the light. This was my mother's, he said. The only thing of hers I still have, and I would be honored if you would wear it. Miriam Caldwell, will you marry me? Yes, Miriam said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. Jake slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the love and passion he had been holding back, and Miriam kissed him back just as fiercely. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you," Jake said, cupping her face in his hands. "I love your strength and your spirit and your beautiful heart. I love everything about you." "I love you too," Miriam said. "So much. I did not know I could feel this way about anyone." They stayed on the mesa until the sun started to set, making plans for their future. They would get married as soon as possible, they decided. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Miriam would move to the ranch and they would work it together, building up the horse breeding business. Maybe in a few years, they would add cattle or sheep. They would expand the cabin, turn it into a real home with room for the children they both wanted. "I cannot wait to start our life together," Miriam said as they packed up to head back down. "Me neither. Every day I get to wake up knowing you are going to be my wife. That is going to be a good day." They announced their engagement that evening, and Miriam's uncle was overjoyed. He insisted on hosting a celebration dinner at the town's best restaurant, inviting everyone they knew. The whole town seemed genuinely happy for them, and Miriam found herself surrounded by well-wishers and congratulations. The wedding was planned for 6 weeks later, giving them time to prepare, but not so long that they had to wait forever. Miriam spent her days helping Jake at the ranch, and her evenings sewing her wedding dress, with help from some of the town women who had taken her under their wing. It was simple but lovely, made of cream-colored cotton, with lace at the collar and cuffs, practical enough that she could wear it again for special occasions. Jake spent the time making improvements to the cabin. He added a second room for their future children, built a new front porch with a swing, and crafted a beautiful wooden headboard for their bed. Every addition was made with love and care, and Miriam felt herself falling even more deeply in love with him as she watched his plans take shape. The wedding day arrived bright and clear, a perfect October morning, with just enough chill in the air to be comfortable. The ceremony was held at the small church in Copper Ridge, and despite their intention to keep it small, it seemed like half the town showed up. Miriam's uncle walked her down the aisle, tears streaming down his face, and when Jake turned to watch her approach, the look on his face took her breath away. He looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, like he could not believe his luck, like she was his whole world, and Miriam knew she was looking at him the same way. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and support each other, to work side by side, to build a life of meaning and joy together. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jake kissed Miriam with such tenderness and passion that the whole congregation broke into applause. The reception was held at her uncle's store, which had been cleared of merchandise and decorated with wildflowers and bunting. There was food and music and dancing, and Miriam had never been happier. She danced with Jake, with her uncle, with the sheriff and various townspeople who had become friends. But always, her eyes returned to her husband, standing tall and handsome, and looking at her with such love that it made her heart ache in the best possible way. As the sun began to set, Jake and Miriam slipped away from the celebration. They rode back to the ranch together, now truly their ranch, their home. Jake carried Miriam over the threshold of the cabin, and they both laughed at the traditionality of it even as they honored it. That night, they made love for the first time, slowly and tenderly, learning each other's bodies with care and reverence. Jake traced the muscles in Miriam's arms with his fingers and lips, murmuring about how beautiful she was, how strong, how perfect. And Miriam explored his body in turn, marveling at the strength in his chest and shoulders, the gentleness in his touch despite his power. Afterward, lying tangled together in their marriage bed, Jake held Miriam close and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for seeing me," Miriam whispered back, "for loving all of me, especially the parts I thought I had to hide. I love every part of you, always will." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and when morning came, they woke to their first full day as husband and wife. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that was both challenging and deeply satisfying. Miriam and Jake worked side by side from dawn until dusk, training horses, maintaining the property, building their business. Miriam's strength proved invaluable in every aspect of ranch work, from hauling feed to breaking wild horses to building new corrals. and Jake never failed to appreciate it, to tell her how lucky he was to have such a capable partner. Word spread quickly about the quality of horses coming from the Brennan Ranch, and business boomed. They sold trained horses to ranchers and cowboys from all over Arizona and beyond. Jake taught Miriam everything he knew about training, and she developed her own techniques, her own special touch with difficult horses. Together, they made an exceptional team. But it was not all work. They made time for each other too, for long rides into the desert, for quiet evenings on the porch watching the stars, for dancing in the cabin to music only they could hear. They talked and laughed and made love and dreamed together, building not just a business, but a true partnership. 8 months into their marriage, Miriam discovered she was pregnant. She told Jake one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction, despite knowing he wanted children. But his joy was immediate and overwhelming. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and whooping with delight, then set her down gently and kissed her with such tenderness it brought tears to her eyes. "A baby," he kept saying, his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Miriam asked, even though the answer was obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. Miriam, you have given me everything. A home, a partner, a purpose, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was not easy. Miriam suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and later, as her belly grew large, the physical work of the ranch became more challenging. But she was determined to keep working, to keep pulling her weight, and Jake supported her, while also gently insisting she not overdo it. "You are growing our child," he reminded her when she got frustrated with her limitations. "That is work enough. Let me handle the heavy lifting for a while." It was hard for Miriam to step back, but she learned to let Jake take on more of the physical labor while she focused on the training work that required patience and skill rather than brute strength. And truthfully, she enjoyed having more time to prepare for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, setting up the second room as a nursery. Their son was born on a warm spring day in April of 1884, after a long and difficult labor. Jake stayed by Miriam's side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was, how much he loved her. And when the baby finally arrived, wailing and red-faced and perfect, Jake wept openly. "He is beautiful," Jake whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with infinite gentleness. "Miriam, he is so beautiful." They named him Samuel James Brennan, Samuel after Miriam's father, and James after Jake's. Little Sam had his father's dark hair and his mother's strong features, and from the moment they laid eyes on him, both parents were completely in love. The first few months of Sam's life were exhausting, but wonderful. Miriam and Jake took turns caring for him, walking the floor when he cried at night, marveling at every coo and smile. Jake was a devoted father, changing diapers and giving baths without complaint, singing lullabies in his deep voice that always seemed to calm the baby. "You are a natural at this," Miriam told him one night as she watched him rock Sam to sleep. "So are you. Look at us. We made a whole person. A perfect little person." As Sam grew, the ranch continued to thrive. They hired a young man named Peter to help with some of the heavier work, giving Miriam and Jake more time to focus on training and on their growing family. Sam was an easy, happy child who seemed to love the ranch as much as his parents did. He took his first steps chasing after a friendly barn cat and spoke his first word while watching his father work with a horse. Da. When Sam was 18 months old, Miriam discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter, Grace Elizabeth, was born in the fall of 1885, a tiny thing with her mother's auburn hair and her father's green-gray eyes. 2 children, Jake said wonderingly, holding Grace while Sam toddled around their feet. "We have got 2 perfect children, a successful ranch, each other. Miriam, sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe this is real." "It is real," Miriam assured him, leaning against his side. "We built this, together." The years that followed were full and rich. Sam and Grace grew up healthy and happy, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with ranch chores as soon as they were able. The Brennan Ranch became known throughout the territory, not just for its excellent horses, but for the family that ran it, the partnership of equals who had built something truly special. Miriam never lost her strength. Even after 2 pregnancies, her arms remained muscular and capable, and she continued to work alongside Jake, training horses and running the ranch. And Jake never stopped admiring that strength, never stopped telling her she was beautiful, never stopped appreciating her for exactly who she was. When Sam was 8 and Grace was 6, Jake and Miriam decided to expand their operation further. They bought an additional 100 acres and increased their herd. It was ambitious, but they had the skills in the partnership to make it work. They hired more help and began breeding not just working horses, but fancy show horses that sold for premium prices. The business success allowed them some luxuries. They expanded the cabin into a proper house with multiple bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a parlor for entertaining. They bought nice furniture and dishes, though nothing ostentatious. Comfort and practicality remained their priorities. But the real wealth was in their family. Sam grew into a strong, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Grace was spirited and brave, with her mother's determination and her father's charm. They fought sometimes, as siblings do, but mostly they were best friends, inseparable partners in mischief and adventure. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jake took Miriam back up to the mesa where he had proposed. It had become their special place, somewhere they went when they needed to reconnect or make big decisions. 10 years, Jake said as they sat on their blanket, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. A decade of marriage, and I love you more now than I did the day I met you. That was quite a day, Miriam said with a smile, remembering the gunshot, the overturned wagon, the moment Jake had ridden into her life. I thought I was going to die out in that desert. Instead, I found everything I had ever wanted. Strong arms like yours are rare, Jake said, repeating the words he had spoken to her that first day. He took her hands, running his thumbs over the calluses from years of ranch work, over the rings she still wore every day. And I think they are beautiful on you. I always have, and I always will. And you, Miriam said, touching his face, you saw me when no one else did. You loved me for who I was, not who I thought I should be. You gave me permission to be strong and proud of it. You did not need my permission. You just needed someone to recognize what was already there. They made love there on the mesa as the stars came out, slow and tender and filled with a decade of accumulated love and trust and partnership. And when they rode home together in the moonlight, Miriam thought about how far they had come from that first desperate day in the desert. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes and challenges. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations and difficult horses. They dealt with childhood illnesses and teenage rebellion, with the bittersweet pride of watching their children grow and become their own people. Sam followed in his parents' footsteps, developing a gift for training that rivaled even Jake's. At 20, he took over a significant portion of the day-to-day operations, allowing Jake and Miriam to slow down just a little to enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. Grace surprised everyone by developing a passion not just for horses, but for breeding them, studying bloodlines and genetics with single-minded dedication. At 18, she made her first independent breeding decisions, and the resulting foals were extraordinary. She has got your mind for detail, Jake told Miriam proudly as they watched Grace work with one of the young horses. And your determination. Our children got the best of both of us. They did, Miriam agreed. We made good humans, you and me. At 50, Jake was still strong and capable, though his dark hair had gone gray at the temples. He moved a little slower in the mornings, complained sometimes about his knees, but he could still gentle a wild horse better than anyone Miriam knew. And Miriam at 46 was still the strong, capable woman Jake had fallen in love with all those years ago. Her auburn hair had threads of silver now, and there were lines around her eyes from years of squinting against the desert sun, but her arms were still muscular, her stride still confident. She could still outwork most of the ranch hands half her age, and Jake still looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset with their grandchildren playing in the yard, Sam had married a lovely woman named Clara, and they had given Jake and Miriam 3 grandchildren so far. Miriam turned to Jake with a contented sigh. We did good, she said simply. We did better than good. We built something that will last, something our children and their children will inherit, a legacy. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers like they had 1,000 times before. And we did it together. Would you change anything? Miriam asked. If you could go back. Jake thought about it seriously, then shook his head. Not a single thing. Every moment, good and bad, led us here. To this porch, these grandchildren, this life. How could I want to change any of that? I feel the same way. Even that attack in the desert, even though it was terrifying at the time, I cannot wish it had not happened. Because if it had not, I might never have met you. I would have found you somehow, Jake said with certainty. Fate has a way of bringing people together when they are meant to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink, their granddaughter Emma came running up to the porch. "Grandma, can you show me again how to throw the rope like you did yesterday? I almost got it." Miriam stood with a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Come on, let us practice before it gets too dark." Jake watched as Miriam took Emma out to the yard and began demonstrating rope techniques, her movements still sure and strong despite the years. Emma, who had inherited her grandmother's build and strength, watched with rapt attention, trying to mimic Miriam's form. Sam came to stand beside his father on the porch. "She is still teaching," he said with affection. "Ma never stops." "No, she does not. That is one of the many things I love about her." Jake glanced at his son. "You know, the day I met your mother, I knew she was special, but I had no idea just how lucky I was going to be. She made me better, made my life richer, gave me a family and a purpose beyond just surviving. Everything good in my life comes from her." "You did the same for her," Sam said. "She has told me stories about how she used to feel self-conscious about being strong, about not fitting the mold other women were expected to fit. You helped her see her strength as beautiful. That gift, Dad, that was everything." Jake felt tears prick his eyes. "We saved each other, I think, in that desert, and every day since." The grandchildren eventually wore themselves out, and families said their good nights and headed to their own homes on the expanded ranch property. Jake and Miriam cleaned up the supper dishes together, moving around their kitchen with the practiced ease of decades of partnership. That night, lying in bed with Miriam's head on his shoulder, Jake felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I have loved you for 28 years, and I will love you for however many more we have got." "I love you too," Miriam whispered back. "My partner, my best friend, my heart. Thank you for building this life with me." They fell asleep holding each other, just as they had every night since their wedding, and outside, the desert wind whispered through the cottonwood trees, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and Jake and Miriam continued to live their life on the ranch they had built together. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, welcomed new grandchildren, and watched the older ones grow into capable young adults. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of Sam and Grace, who had inherited not just their parents' skills, but their values, hard work, integrity, respect for the horses and the land. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, filling the house with noise and laughter. Jake and Miriam stood together in the middle of the chaos, holding hands, watching the family they had created. 40 years, Miriam said, shaking her head in wonder. "How did we get here so fast?" "One day at a time," Jake said. "One sunrise, one sunset, one choice to love each other through whatever came our way." Their oldest grandson, Sam's eldest boy, Jake Jr., stood to give a toast. At 22, he looked remarkably like his grandfather had at that age, tall and dark-haired, with that same intensity in his eyes. "To Grandma and Grandpa," he said, raising his glass. "They taught us that love is not just a feeling, but an action, a choice you make every day. They showed us that strength comes in many forms, and that the strongest partnerships are built on mutual respect and appreciation. They created not just a successful ranch, but a family legacy of love and hard work. We are all better people because of their example. To 40 more years." Everyone raised their glasses and cheered, and Jake saw Miriam wipe tears from her eyes. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You know what the best part is?" he whispered. "What?" "I meant what I said that very first day. Strong arms like yours are rare, and I think they are beautiful on you, and I have had 40 years to appreciate that strength, to watch you use it to build this incredible life, to raise these amazing children, to love me even when I did not deserve it. You are the most beautiful person I have ever known, inside and out, and I fall in love with you more deeply every single day." Miriam turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that still sparkled with the same spirit and determination he had first fallen in love with. "You saw me, Jake, when no one else did, when I did not even see myself clearly. You saw exactly who I was and loved me for it. You gave me the greatest gift, permission to be fully myself. Everything we built because you made me feel strong and capable and worthy. I love you with everything I am." They kissed then, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and the evidence of a life well lived, and everyone cheered again. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually families drifted home and quiet descended on the ranch once more. Jake and Miriam walked hand in hand around the property, as they had done countless times over the decades, checking on horses, enjoying the cool night air, simply being together. They stopped at the corral where it all began, where Jake had first taught Miriam to train horses, where their partnership had truly started to take shape. "Remember when you thought you could not do this?" Jake said, leaning on the fence. "You were so nervous about working with Thunder. I remember, and I remember you telling me I had good instincts, that the horses trusted me. You gave me confidence when I had none. You had the confidence all along. You just needed someone to help you see it." They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the horses move quietly in the barn, to the wind rustling through the trees, to the eternal song of the desert night. "If you could do it all over again," Miriam asked, "would you still ride into that canyon, still save that girl with the overturned wagon?" Jake turned to look at her, his face serious in the moonlight. "I would ride into that canyon 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, if it meant finding you. You are my everything, Miriam, my partner, my love, my home. This ranch, these children, this whole beautiful life we built, it all starts and ends with you." "And you are mine," Miriam said softly. "My rescuer, my teacher, my lover, my friend. The man who taught me that strength and femininity are not opposites, that I could be powerful and gentle, capable and vulnerable, all at the same time. You made me whole, Jake." They walked back to the house together, their steps slower than they once had been, but no less sure. Inside, they prepared for bed with the easy routine of long marriage, and when they climbed under the covers, Jake pulled Miriam close, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist, the way they had slept for 40 years. "Good night, my love," he whispered into her hair. "Good night, my heart," she whispered back. And as they drifted off to sleep, both of them were thinking the same thing, that a single moment of fate, a chance encounter in the desert, had given them everything they had ever wanted, and more than they had ever dreamed possible. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and they had built a love that would endure long after they were gone, living on in the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. The ranch that Jake and Miriam built stood as a testament to what two people could create when they truly saw each other, truly valued each other's strengths, truly committed to building something together. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that Jake had recognized from the very first day. That strength, real strength, was beautiful, and that loving someone for who they truly were was the greatest gift you could give. Their story became a legend in Copper Ridge and the surrounding territories, passed down through generations. People spoke of the cowboy who had saved a strong woman in the desert and had the wisdom to see her strength as beautiful. They spoke of the woman who had found the courage to be fully herself with a partner who celebrated rather than diminished her. And they spoke of the love that had grown from that chance meeting, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger each time. Years later, when Jake and Miriam were both gone, their great-grandchildren would still work the ranch they had founded. The business had grown and changed with the times, but the core values remained the same: integrity, hard work, respect, and the understanding that true partnership was built on appreciating each other's strengths rather than trying to change them. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind blew just right, you could almost hear the echo of Jake's words, spoken so many decades before, but still as true as the day he had first said them. "Strong arms like yours are rare, and I think they are beautiful on you." Those words had changed everything. They had given Miriam the gift of being seen, of being valued, of being loved for exactly who she was. And she had given Jake the gift of her trust, her partnership, her love. And together they had built something that would last for generations. It was a love story born in the Wild West, in a time of danger and hardship and endless possibility. It was a story about two people who had lost everything and found each other. It was about strength and gentleness, passion and partnership, hard work and lasting love. But most of all, it was a story about seeing the beauty in someone else, about recognizing their true worth, about having the courage to say the words that needed to be said and the wisdom to build a life on that foundation. Jake and Miriam Brennan's love story did not end with their deaths. It lived on in every strong person who refused to hide their capabilities, in every partnership built on mutual respect, in every family that valued both strength and gentleness. It lived on in the horses that still ran on the Brennan Ranch, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. And somewhere, in that place beyond this world, Jake and Miriam were together still, holding hands, watching over the family and the ranch they had built with such love and dedication. They were at peace, knowing that their lives had mattered, that their love had created ripples that would extend far beyond their time on Earth. The cowboy and the strong woman, brought together by fate in the Arizona desert, had found in each other everything they had been searching for. They had built a love that was both epic and everyday, both passionate and practical. They had proven that the best partnerships were those where both people were celebrated for who they truly were, where strength was recognized as beautiful, where differences were valued rather than eliminated. Their story became the standard by which others measured their own relationships. When young couples in Copper Ridge spoke their wedding vows, they often invoked the names of Jake and Miriam Brennan, asking for a love as strong and true as theirs had been. When parents raised their children, they told stories of the couple who had built an empire from nothing through hard work and mutual support. And always, always, they remembered Jake's words, "Strong arms like yours are rare, and I think they are beautiful on you." Those words had been more than a compliment. They had been a recognition of worth, an acknowledgement of value, a declaration that strength in all its forms was worthy of celebration and love. In the end, that was the legacy Jake and Miriam left behind. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a fundamental understanding that love at its best celebrated rather than diminished. That true partnership meant seeing your spouse clearly and loving what you saw. That strength, whether physical or emotional or spiritual, was always, always beautiful. Their love story had a beginning in that desert canyon, but it had no ending. It continued on in every person who refused to hide who they truly were, in every relationship built on genuine appreciation and respect, in every strong soul who found someone who saw their strength as the gift it was. The cowboy had been right all those years ago. Strong arms like Miriam's were rare, but what was even rarer was the kind of love that recognized that strength, celebrated it, and built a lifetime of partnership upon it. That was the true gift Jake and Miriam had given each other, and the gift their story gave to everyone who heard it. The understanding that we are most beautiful when we are most fully ourselves, and that the greatest love is the love that sees us clearly and cherishes what it sees. And so, their story ended where all the best stories end, not with death or separation, but with legacy, with love that continues beyond the physical, with the understanding that what they had built together would never truly fade because it lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched. Jake and Miriam Brennan had found each other in the Wild West, in a time of harsh beauty and endless possibility. They had built a love that was both tender and fierce, both gentle and strong. They had created a family, a business, a legacy that would endure for generations, and they had done it all by seeing each other truly, by valuing each other completely, by building a partnership based on mutual respect and deep, abiding love. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth holding up as an example of what love could be at its very best. And decades later, centuries later, whenever someone spoke of true partnership, of love that celebrated rather than constrained, of the beauty of strength in all its forms, the story of Jake and Miriam was there, a shining example of what was possible when two people found each other and built something beautiful together. The end of their physical lives was not the end of their story. It lived on, as all great love stories do, in the hearts and minds of everyone who heard it, inspiring new generations to seek that same kind of partnership, that same celebration of each other's authentic selves, that same beautiful recognition that strength in all its many forms is always worthy of love.